Micheline from Micheline Makes again. Do you remember a few weeks back I was doing a take 5 and I asked you a question that if you were a beginner, if it was a beginner sewer who didn't know what to get, what tools to get, not counting the sewing machines and all the big machinery, I wanted to know what 3 tools you would recommend that a beginner sewer would buy. And this was what I got. I got a spreadsheet of all the answers, and I thought I'd go through it all, because if you're a beginner sewer and you're watching this, they're really handy, because the people who've recommended these are people who have, quite a lot of them are people who have sewn for a number of years. They're your granny, your auntie, your mum type people who've sewn for a long time, and they know what is needed. They know which are the best tools to have. So let's start. It came down to 39 items that you kept mentioning, and so I thought you might like to know. So top spot. Number 1, can't go wrong with a good pair of scissors. They don't have to be really, really expensive ones, but they have to be a fairly good pair. Now this one I bought, these are Fiskars, and Fiskars is a good make if you're a beginner sewer. There are better quality ones, but I'm not sure how much the price range is for these. But if you wanted a pair, you could put it on your birthday list or on your Christmas present list, and you know, one of the members of the family or a few of them might pitch in together to get you a pair. Alternatively, there are different sizes. This is Fiskars, this is Fiskars, and that's Fiskars. They're 3 different sizes. The bigger pair you can get, the better it is for cutting out fabric, because when you cut the fabric out, you don't want to do little snips like that. You want good clear snips going along as you're cutting the fabric. That's the reason why they have big pairs. Don't be fooled by a big pair that's cheap, which I have just done. I got this big pair. It looked good, looked fantastic, really classy, long blade. Look, it's bigger than that one, bigger than that one, but it doesn't cut very well. It's rubbish. It's not a good make, and the blades, look what happens when I try to cut. The blades don't go together. So you really want to go for a make that's well known, and as I say, the Fiskars are the most common one. I'll put a list down of other ones that you can get that are equally as good. And no doubt if you read the comments underneath, there'll always be somebody who says, if I can get my cat out of the way, sorry about this folks, she's just going for a wander around the table. There'll always be someone who says there's another pair that you can get, but the ones that I've generally stuck to are Fiskars. She is just about to probably knock you over. Sorry folks. So these are a good pair of scissors. Now then, someone mentioned that they have a pair of scissors that have serrations on them, and I just happened to notice that one of mine did. Which one was it? Where did I find it? Yes, this is another. This is actually not an expensive pair, but it cuts very beautifully. And this one has, if I can get a bit closer with it, it has tiny little serrations along the blade there. And apparently that helps in cutting the fabric. As I say, this is a cheapish pair. I can't remember how I think I got it free with something that I bought. I'm not even sure if maybe it's the sewing machine that I got, and they gave me some free scissors and some free thread. But a few people have mentioned that they've got some with the little striations on here, can you hear that? A little ridges along the edge, and they reckon that they cut very well. So Good pair of scissors. That was just about, I would say just about everybody, almost everybody, named that as one of the things. And the thing about good pair of scissors is, when you get a good pair of scissors, you don't lend them out to anyone. Are you listening? Don't lend them out to anyone. Not your friend, not your best friend, not your mother, not your husband, not your son. Because if they come back and they've used it for cutting pieces of wire or things that shouldn't be cut, then you'll lose your sharpness on your blade, on your scissors. So the most taboo thing that everybody says is, do not lend your scissors to anyone. These are sacred. Just like, imagine it's your husband, if your husband's a DIY and he's got the most expensive chisel, and chisels have to have sharp blades. If somebody goes and takes it and starts chopping off bricks into half, they're going to blunt that chisel. So you are not going to like that. Then they aren't going to like it. So you are equally the same. You do not lend these scissors to anybody, not for wallpapering, not for cutting cardboard or anything. These are special scissors. Buy some cheap scissors for wallpaper, buy some cheap scissors for other things, but don't let anybody have these. A good pair of scissors should be able to cut right the way through the fabric in one go, but another thing is it should be able to cut right at the end, and that one isn't cutting at the end very well. See, it's not cutting. A good pair of scissors should be able to go right to the end there like that and nip it. Now, funnily enough, this pair is a Frister and Rossmann, and this pair is just a plain stainless steel one that I got probably with some free thread. It doesn't say what make it is. So that's number one. The next one was a stitch unpicker or a seam ripper, and that's one of these. Now the thing about this one is, I don't know if you can see it. Let me get closer, see if you can see it. Yes. This is a stitch unpicker and a seam ripper. This is a stitch unpicker and a seam ripper. And this is a stitch unpicker and a seam ripper. If you're going to go for a stitch unpicker and a seam ripper, do not go for the one without a ball on. Go for the one with the ball on, because when you use that one, the ball part stops you from slashing fabric, and there's nothing worse when you're unpicking stitches and suddenly this slips and it goes into the fabric and tears a hole in your fabric. So the little ball part is very important, and I'll show you a little video of what you use the ball part for. Really good for unpicking stitches. I've stitched this rather like, it's a thicker canvas material. And it's rather like a hem of a skirt where you've just stitched it up, but supposing you've made a mistake. So you take your stitch unpicker and you unpick the first few stitches of the piece and try and cut that into there to open it up and pull. Now as I've got older, I found that my grip is not as good, so I use a pair of pliers to pull the thread like this and just pull it out like that. So I've got started like that. So you take your stitch unpicker with the one with the ball on, push the ball underneath now and run your stitch unpicker underneath there. You might need to get going at the start, but if you keep going right the way along like that, because I haven't got much material here to hold on to, I can't really put it very well, but basically like that. See if I can go further there. That's it. It unpicks it because the ball stops it from making a hole in the fabric, and then You can either scrape it off. I sometimes use a ruler just to scrape it off like that. You can use a rubber to get all the spare thread off, and any on that side. Some people use a rubber, I use a ruler. And so you've got your thread off that way, and that's the way you do it, with the ball on the inside, and you run it along the edge. Some people use Stanley knives, which you can do if you feel competent enough to do that. Some people use little mini scissors, but this is what everybody has said, a stitch unpicker or a seam ripper. This rips the seam open. So that's number 2. Number 3 was quality pins, and everyone said you must have some. Well, there was actually 2 number 3s. One of them was quality pins, and a lot of them said you've got to have good pins. If you have cheap pins, they will not work very well. Now I have some pins here. These are handy ones to have because they have a ball on the end and you can hold them. Some people in days gone by, we've learned this. We older people have learned this, because you used to be able to you didn't get balls on the end of them. You just got little pins with a tiny little end on, and they were really hard to manipulate. Not too bad when you're young, but as you get older they're harder. But a good set of pins are really worth spending money on. Now I bought these prim pins. I bought these. These are prim pins, and I bought them 2 years back in the at the Harrogate Knitting and Stitching Show. And when I got them, I don't know if you can see there, they look like matchsticks. They weren't cheap. They were not cheap. I think they were about £5 or £6. And I thought, oh, will I go for them or will I not? So I did. But because they were so expensive, I put them away, because I thought, oh, I don't want to use them. I don't want to wait. And you know, when you get good things, you don't want to waste your money on them. But the other week, I ran out of pins, and I got these out. And these are fantastic pins for the simple reason that, if I put that in there, they're nice and sharp. They go into the fabric lovely. One of the most important things is it's got to go into the fabric lovely without pushing the fibres through. They have a long shaft there which grips. It's got a double grip there, a narrow one there and a long one there. If you have arthritic hands or rheumatic hands, this is fantastic for putting in and out of the fabric, even better than those ones. So this has to be really worth spending your money on, especially if you have some problem with your fingers, because it's got a long piece to hold. So number 3 was pins, and I shall be getting these out and using these more often. So that's really handy. A good set of pins. And the one good thing about these is, because they've got a big head on them and they drop on the floor, you can easily pick them up and you can see them. Similarly, the ones with the little balls on, you can pick them up and see them. The ones without any ends on are very difficult, and in my motherhood, I can count on one hand the number, more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times, that my children have walked around the carpet and a pin has gone into their feet, and they've screamed and they've said, "Mummy, will you not put pins on the floor?" And I felt awful, because they were the pins with the little silver ends. These you can see, these you can pick up. But there's something else that goes very well with this, and I'll tell you in a second. The other number 3 that everyone recommended was a measuring tape, and that's something like this. You can get them, they're not very expensive. They have inches on one side, if you can see, and centimetres on the other. Now the good thing about a measuring tape is, on one side of the continent they work in inches and feet, and on the other side they work in centimetres. So that way you've got a measurement of both, so you can see that 12 inches is equal to 31 centimetres. Also, if you're measuring hems, you've got a little easy measurement. If you want to make a 1.5 inch set hem or a 4 centimeter hem, you can go along the fabric and measure it. I've had to put a little bit in here because I'm uploading this the suggested tools that all the viewers had made, and there's a little piece missing, and it's number 4, which is a pin cushion magnet. Or is it a magnetic pin cushion? One or t'other is what you lot out there, you people, you viewers, recommend to beginners for to use a magnetic pin cushion. So here's some information about it. So it's very important for picking up the pins, and when you're sewing and you're taking things out and chucking it on, if you're sewing along the sewing machine and you're throwing it on, you can throw the pin on and know that it's always going to hit the right place. So that is really handy. It doesn't have to be an all singing all dancing magnetic pin cushion. This one is a prim one, but you can buy a magnetic fishing weight and that will do exactly the same job. It will be stronger. Or you can get magnetic wrist cushions, wrist pin cushions that you put on your wrist and it holds the pins there. It's basically the magnetic part is as big as a large watch glass. So the magnetic pin cushion is another one that everybody says you should get. The next one, number 5, was the ruler. You must, well, they're not saying you must have a ruler, they are highly recommending a ruler. Now you can get all sorts of rulers. You could get something just as little as this, if you're beginning, you can get a little one like that, or a little 12-inch ruler that you get from the stationery shop. Serves its purpose, not bad. But if you're going to get a good ruler, then the best one to get is a fairly big rectangular one. Well, at least for me, the one that I like the best is the big rectangular one, and I'll show you what mine's like. You can get all sorts of rulers. You could use a long one like this. This is actually a one that my husband had. It measures up to, well, it measures to the middle there. It measures to 26. And then along the top it goes up to 50. This is a long ruler, not bad. You can use it to cut up and down, to draw your lines. Good ruler. But the one that I find handy is this one, and it's about a 2 foot by 6 inches. It's 24 inches by 6 inches, and I find that a handy one. I've got a sucker handle on there, but it comes without the handle. And this is really handy, especially if you're doing quilting and patchwork. You can get some it's got some good guides. The only downside for this one is it's all in inches. It doesn't have centimetres on. So I would recommend, if you can get one that does inches and centimetres. Equally as good as this little wooden ruler. You know, if you're starting off, you don't have to have a quality ruler. You just need something that you can use that measures, preferably with inches on and preferably with centimetres on the other side. So that's the ruler. Number 6, we have 3 items that that came out the same, and they were all voted on. One was the rotary cutter. A lot of people like the rotary cutter. I had never heard of a rotary cutter until I came back into sewing again, sewing a few years back. I think it'd be about 10 years back, and I came across this rotary cutter and I thought it was fantastic. You can do without it. Your scissors, if you couldn't afford a rotary cutter, your scissors will do equally the same job. A pin cushion. Those who don't like necessarily the magnetic pin cushion, a lot of them said a pin cushion. I have a wrist pin cushion. I have never ever worn wrist pin cushions before. I used to have a little jar when I first started, and right up until 10 years ago, I had a little pâté jar that I stuffed with wadding, and then I put a piece of cloth over the top, did a stitch line right the way around, pulled it in so the little jar was full of this wadding, and I trimmed it with a little piece of lace, and that was my pin cushion. That remained my pin cushion for 30 years. And then I made one of these, and I thought, oh, I'm never going to wear that. But it's very handy when you're sewing at the machine. You just keep taking them out and putting them there. Equally as good as that one, where you take them out and drop them onto here. It's just a case of which one you prefer. But the pin cushion, I do like a pin cushion. I prefer now the wrist pin cushion to the table pin cushion, but it's all a matter of taste. The next one that a lot of you said was the hem gauge. A little gauge like this. I'll put it like that so you can see. A little gauge like this, that has measurements here. It has different widths, and you use it for also any number of things. You can use it for measuring hems. You've got a centimetre, 1/2 centimetre, you've got 2 centimetres here, you've got 4 centimetres along the bottom. It's so handy for if you've got to measure something against, if you're measuring a hem or if you're measuring a seam and you want to keep it the same all the way down, then you can use this to measure it against. So the hemline, not necessarily hemline, but there are lots of other ones, measuring gauges. They are really handy. Then we come to the 7th items, and 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 things that came out with the same number of votes. The first one, and I have a lot of these, the first one was a small pair of scissors. A small pair of scissors, especially sharp ones. Now my favourite ones are these little ones. They are really, really good, and they're a bit like stitch unpickers because they unpick. You can use them for snipping your thread, snipping, doing all sorts of things, unpicking things. But I find a small pair of scissors really good. And I've got 3 pairs here, varying in sizes. But my favourite one is the really tiny one. Really tiny. Do not lend these to anybody, because if you do, then again, they won't cut very well. That's my favourite pair. That's my second favourite. That's a spare. So small pair of scissors, a lot of people said that you could do with a small pair of scissors as well as a big pair. Now your small pair doesn't have to be that small. I got another pair there that's slightly bigger. This one is another one of the who's the Fritters and Rossmann. Fritters and Rossmann do this size, and they also do smaller again. These are really like an embroidery scissor, but they're really good for trimming off threads. So little pair of scissors, really, really handy. The other one that was equally good points was pattern weights. And a lot of you said that when you lay out a pattern, now in the olden days, you got your pattern, you pinned it on, you cut round it, and then you did all the appropriate markings on the fabric. Now you don't do it like that. You're doing everything to speed things up. So putting pattern weights on the pattern makes it a lot easier for you to cut round, get it all cut and done very quickly. Because I would like to know, for me, the most boring part of sewing is tracing or cutting a pattern out, putting it onto the fabric and cutting it out. I like it once you've got all that done, you can start sewing. So that for me is the most boring part, and it's the part that you want to get done quickly. If you have pattern weights, then you're not having to pin it on. If you have pattern markers for marking the dots and marking the dots, then that makes life easier. And if you have a good pair of scissors, you can get around that fabric and cut it out quickly and get ready for the best bit. So pattern weights are the next one. And another equally good one was, well, we've got 2 of this, a cutting mat. A cutting mat. Now the same thing, I didn't know when I came back into sewing, never heard of a cutting mat, never heard of a rotary cutter. And so first thing I did was get a rotary cutter. I ordered a rotary cutter, I ordered a cutting mat. and I didn't know what you did with them, but I tried it and I couldn't believe how fantastic it is, how perfect it is for cutting through fabric. The rotary cutter onto the cutting mat is really good. It cuts straight perfect cuts. You've got to be careful, it's quite dangerous, but once you get used to manipulating it and using it properly, then it's not too bad. The cutting mat saves making marks on your dining table or whatever table you're cutting your fabric on. Some people prefer to cut the fabric out with a rotary cutter on a cutting mat. I don't have a big enough cutting mat to put onto my table. If I did, I probably would do the same. They work well together. Not necessarily the first thing you should buy, but a very good purchase if you do. And the other one is a tailor's curve. Now I haven't used a tailor's curve for a long time. Where's mine? A tailor's curve. Now this is a tailor's curve. This is a pretty rubbish tailor's curve, but it serves the same purpose. If you're really into dressmaking, you want something a bit firmer than this. This is very cheap. I got a package of several of them like that with different curves on them. There, like that. I don't even know if you can see them very well. The packet that I got included all sorts of things like that and that. I can't remember, I think it was about £10 for the whole lot, but it caters for the curve on the sleeves. As I say, if you're going for something, if you're really going to be doing sewing a lot more, you want something more substantial than this. But this serves the same purpose. It's got the curve for when you're doing sleeves, when you wanted to draw a nice curve on a sleeve, or when you're doing any pattern making. So a tailor's curve came in at number 7. And the last one that came in at number 7 were forceps. Forceps or hemostats. These. Now I've heard of hemostats and I've heard of forceps. Yes, because I used to teach biology and we used to use those in dissection. But I never thought that you would use them in sewing, and it was several people recommended them to me years ago. And the thing about them is that when you are doing any sewing with forceps, you can actually, it's like scissors, but it works the opposite way. So if you do that, it won't come away. So it's very handy for turning things inside out, for when you're doing a tube and you want to get a hold of something, then pull it through. Then you can, by locking it at this end, it keeps this permanently closed onto the fabric and you can pull the fabric through. I have a big pair and a small pair. This pair has a curved blade. Don't use that one as much as I do this long one. And this actually was bought by accident. I didn't think it was as long as that. I bought it on Amazon, and when it came I went, oh golly, those are really too big. I will never use them. But I actually do. They're really good for turning things inside out. So I would imagine if you're really going to go for one, don't go for them that small, don't go for them that big, go for the one in the middle. This one is about 6 inches, that one is about, well, what does this measure? This measures 10 inches, this one measures 5 inches. You want something in between, or maybe people below might recommend what size they prefer to use. But these are the 2 pairs of hemostats or forceps that I have. And then we come to number 8. And there was 1, 2, 3 number 8s. And the first number 8 was magnetic seam guide. A magnetic seam guide. And basically it's something like this that you put down onto your plate, your throat plate on your sewing machine, and it keeps the fabric in the same position all the way along when you're sewing. It means that your seams are going to stay the same width apart all the time. And I will show you exactly how it works. Then the next one was a good light. You need a good light to see what you're doing. This one here is a one that bends, and I can have it at different strengths. and I find that handy. Another one that I use, because there is a light on my sewing machine, but the light on my sewing machine is not very strong, is I have this one that goes inside. It goes in the arch of the sewing machine, and when I press the button on it like this, let me just show, it goes in here, around here, and when I switch it on, it brightens up that area. See how much it brightens the area up? So that makes a big difference. And the next, number 8, was a friction pen. I don't have a friction pen, so I'm not altogether knowledgeable on what a friction pen does. I think a friction pen is where you can draw on your fabric, and then when you iron it, it disappears. But I have been told by some people that if you do that, sometimes on certain fabrics it doesn't disappear, so you've got to be very careful that it doesn't show up. But a friction pen was one that a lot of people mentioned. And the other thing that they mentioned, was a pair of forceps or that purple thang. And that purple thang or a pair of forceps, I always have. I've just bought a purple thang and I can't find where I put it, which is very appropriate. But I find a good pair of forceps. I bought cheap ones from the pound shop and I haven't found that they work very well. But a good pair of forceps is really good for using to thread things through your needles. It's good for manipulating things. The one that I've got that I like, and it's here somewhere and I can't find it. It's usually attached to my sewing machine. Has a little curve end to it. I have a needle threader here, so I don't really need this, but this is the pair of tweezers that I have, which have a bend on them. And the thing I like about them is that I can get a hold of that nicely like that, and then I can thread it through the hole like so, and then I can pick it up on the other side. Now, what you can also do if you have difficulty seeing, I've already told you about these other this other gadget for threading, but this for people who use these tweezers, the tweezers are very, very handy. Now let me show you another thing. If you have difficulty seeing behind, what you need is a little piece of white paper. Just something like that, a little piece of white paper. I've torn a piece off there. And you put that behind here. And that helps you to see a lot better. Now if I zoom in a bit closer, if I get the tweezers again, and I pick up the end like that, and the nice thing about them being bent tweezers is you can actually see what you're doing. Put it through there and you can actually see it on the paper behind. So I can now pull that through like that. Another trick is when you've wound this up and you're pulling up your bobbin thread, you can either use this to pull it through from underneath, or you can use your purple thang, this purple thang. And by doing that, if I have the bobbin and I put it in like that and I weave that round there, this is how mine works. And this is a little cover that goes on there for me. So in this case, that I use that little cover to pull my thread through. And this is what I do. I turn the wheel on the right hand side, pull it up, pull the thread up like that, and then I just slide that underneath like that, and that brings both of them through, and then I put my cover on. So I've now got both the threads at one side. It has a curve end, and I find the curve end is really handy for using. But the purple thang is really handy for when you're sewing, because you use the purple thang where your fingers would go. I have had needles through my fingernails enough times to know that you do not put your fingers near that foot where the needle comes down. It's gone through the edge of my finger, it's gone through the nail, you know, and it's painful when that happens. Thankfully it's never hit the bone. But the purple thang stops that from happening, because the purple thing becomes your finger and you're using that to manipulate your fabric underneath the needle. So highly recommend the purple thing. It says quarter on here. That says quarter. It's got a hole for threading. It's got a hole for threading things through. It's got a curved bit there. And so when you're sewing, if you're sewing, say I'm about to sew a dart here. So if I'm about to sew here, and I put my needle in there, I can take my pin off, put my magnetic. So here I have, I've got my magnetic pin cushion, so I can throw the magnetic pins on as I go. My needle down, and if I want, I can either use this to guide. It means I'm not putting my finger under there, and I can actually use that to guide myself forward, reverse, and then I'm going to go forward again, and I'm pulling this out here, and what I do is I just pick that up and sling it on there. Don't even have to touch it. Holding the back there. Another trick I have is, this is jersey, and so I always do a straight stitch, but I have a fairly big stitch, and I pull the fabric gently, and like that it's actually catering for the stretch in it, and it means if I pull it a little bit here, and I'm pulling this out as I go, right off the edge of the fabric, lift that up and pull it out to there, and you can see the straight lines there, but when I pull it, it's not snapping it because I've actually done it, I've sewn it with a bit of stretch there. You can see that there's straight stitches there. Now this isn't the it's inspired by that purple thing. I think it's a bit cheaper, this one that I've got here, this pink one. But it's basically the same thing. It's a quilter stiletto, so you use that part for when you're quilting. A 1/4 inch seam allowance, so you can, as you're sewing, you can go along like that and make sure it's a 1/4 inch. It's for pushing stuffing into things, either that end or that end. You can thread ribbons or elastics. You can poke corners. Use that to poke the corners onto when you're making bags and you want to get the corners, and it's for guiding the fabric through here without the needle hitting your finger, because I'm sure sometime in your life you might get a needle near or in your finger. So this is actually a godsend, and if you get used to using that, you will never ever get a needle through your finger. And lastly, we come to number 9. Number 9, and again, these are things you don't really need to have. They're things you don't really need to have, but they are incredibly handy. And I would probably say this one should come around about, if you're just sewing and you're not sure about sewing machine, this one should come quite near the top personally, and that's pinking shears. Can you see the blades on this? They are blades like that, and when you start sewing more and you have a better sewing machine, you'll probably never need to use these very often, but pinking shears are really good if you haven't got a machine that can do over edging very well, or you don't have a serger or an overlocker. And I hear you say, what's a serger, what's an overlocker? I didn't have a serger or an overlocker until 10 years ago. For all the rest of my sewing experience, I just had a machine that did a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch. And what I used to do was, and it did another one that was a straight with a zigzag. And what I used to do was I'd do the straight stitch for the seam, then I do this, and then I trim it down and then do a zigzag, which is fine, you can do that. But if you don't have, some people have just old machines that their granny's given them or their mum's given them, which is only one that does a straight stitch. If it does a straight stitch, then you can go down the edge with these pinking shears, and that will stop the fabric from fraying. So pinking shears are really handy. They're also very handy when you're doing any crafty stuff as well. Good pair, get a good pair, because I have this pair, I've got two pairs. This is a metal pair and it's pretty naff. It does not very good. This is a lighter aluminium pair. I think this is about 30 odd years old. Never worked very well. I don't even think the make is foreign. It just says foreign make. Not a great pair. Probably should go in the bin. This pair didn't cost the earth. I think they were not that expensive, but it cuts a lot neater, a lot nicer. It doesn't fray, doesn't pull the threads. So that's what you want, a good pair that doesn't pull the threads. And another 9 is a loop turner, which is used for turning the fabric in and out. And a loop turner looks like this. A loop turner which has a little hook on the end that goes, when you've got a tube, that goes in, catches the fabric on the edge, and as you pull the outside one, it pulls it through. And that's very handy for when you've got to make loops. And believe me, when you are sewing, sometime with one of your patterns, you're going to be doing loops. Might not be straight away, but as you get older, as you get more adept, you will be doing loops. Not necessarily the first thing to get, because you're not going to be doing many loops when you first start. You want to do easy patterns. And then the other one that they have said are ruler hem clips. Ruler hem clips are these, and you can use these to measure, well, that's up to 3 inches. You can measure your hem up with those, and it keeps in place while you're sewing. The other thing, which isn't mentioned, I don't think, ruler hem clips, well, where are we? Another number 9 was 1/4 inch double-sided tape. This is complete with cat hairs, but it's a little bit of tape that you can tape onto things. It's double-sided. If I can cut that off to let you see. It's double-sided, so you can tape it onto anything. So you then peel the top off. Let's see if I can get a bit closer for you. There it is, that's the paper, the tape. You peel the top off, and underneath, I don't know if you can see, if I do that, can you see the strip of double-sided tape? That is sticky. So you peel that off, and then if you're doing hems, you can fold that over like that, and it holds your hem in place while you're sewing. So it's stuck in place there, and it holds your hem, and you've got a nice edge there, and then you can do your hemming on your dress. You can also do it the other way. You can also double fold it, and it's held in place, and then you can sew along that top edge for your hem. You can't see it, but it does help. If you're not very good at doing hems, that's really handy. And if you make a mistake, well, because it's double-sided tape, you can get a hold of it and rip it off. It's very sticky, and you can use it for all sorts of other things. I'm sure that there's a load of things. If you have other ideas that you can use that sticky tape for, or any of the other things that I've mentioned, do list them below, because a lot of people do read all the comments, and it's nice to see how you use it. Another one was another number 9 was the iPad. The iPad, or not necessarily an iPad, but a Kindle, anything that's got, or even your laptop, something where you can watch the video of how to do something, or you can either do it for a number of things. An iPad helps you to watch a tutorial. It helps you with a tutorial. It helps you keep your mind busy while you're learning on your machine. You're also learning on the iPad. It also, you can watch all sorts of videos at the same time, and so the iPad is really handy for learning. Sew as you go, learn as you sew. a lot of people are doing videos where they do sew alongs, and having an iPad by the side of your sewing machine helps you follow the sew along, and you can pause it while you get something done, then start it again. So an iPad is very, very handy thing, but not always important. And then we have 1, 2, have I done all the lines? Yes, quadrant seem to, right. And then we come to the number 10s. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've got 12 that were at number 10, and these were just, they didn't, certain people gave the odd vote of these things, and not necessarily important when you first start sewing, but very handy things to have. And the first one was a sleeve board. Having a sleeve board is really handy for when you wanted to do the shoulders, when you want to do awkward parts of your sleeve and you want to do a good job. So a sleeve board is very handy. I have a sleeve board. This one just goes like that. As I say, it's very, very old. I made a little cover for it lately, but very, very old. But it's very handy when you've got the odd 1 or 2 it's very handy when you've got sleeves that you want to do. And another one that I've had, which I've had for a number of years, and to be honest I rarely use this, is the tailor's ham. Penguin and Pear has done a good one to show you how to make one yourself. I bought this one. It's rock hard, this one. I don't know what it's made of. It's got a little bag over the top. It was made by June Taylor Inc. in USA. I haven't used it since 30 years ago, and I often find that my ironing board seems to serve its purpose. I think if I was doing tailoring, this is very good for when you're doing tailored jackets and things and you want a perfect curve to it. I have done that in the past, but I less so now, so this has less need for me. It's got a flat bit on the back there. You put it there and you can use it for pressing all your sleeves and your shoulders, this part, anything that's rounded and curved, your bottom part if you're doing something with a curve on it. And another one was a needle threader. There are all kinds of needle threaders. I have just recently, I've got about 3 of these in my drawer. I find this quite handy. I like my needles to be really tiny holes, and starting to get a bad eyesight, so this is good for me. But if you're young and you're starting, you probably won't have the difficulty to see things like we do. But having said that, not a bad little thing. Not just this kind, any kind. If you come across anything that threads needles, very handy to have in your stock. What else was there? Spring clips. Now I've done this one before. Little spring clips. These are handy little things to have. They sometimes serve the purpose of pins, and someone pointed out to me something about them that I didn't know. If you open the mouth of the spring clip, let me see if I can show you. If you open the mouth of the spring clip, can you see 2 lines on here? 2 lines on the, I don't know if I can get there. 2 lines that are on the plastic. And the 2 lines, somebody told me this and I didn't know it, but they told me that those 2 lines are for when you're doing exact measurements. And the first line is, let me tell you what the first line is. The first line is 1/2 centimetre. The second line is 7 millimeters, and the third line, there's actually a third line right at the back. The actual gap there, right to there, is 1 centimetre. So if you hold that in there, that's 1 centimetre. If you go to the second line, that's 7 millimeters, and if you go to the third line there, that's 1/2 centimetre. Don't know if you can see that. If I go to the first line, it's 1/2 centimetre. If I go, you might see the line there better. You see the lines? If I go to that one, that's 1/2 centimetre. That one's 7 millimetre, and if I go right in, that's 1 centimetre. So really, really handy that. So these take the place of pins, and you can buy them in packs of about 20, and they're very handy when you are wanting to pin round something thick as well, if you're doing coats. Not very handy if you've got a bit of arthritis in your hand, mind you. I sometimes, this finger is starting to hurt, and I'm finding it difficult grabbing and squeezing that. So that was another one. And another one was, well, spectacles are more for the, if you're having difficulty seeing something close up, then go and buy yourself some magnifying spectacles from the cheap shop. They do them in 0.5, 1 strength and 1.5, and sometimes you might find that if you're not seeing things very clearly, a pair of spectacles while you're sewing will make a big difference. And we come to tailor's chalk. There are varying kinds of tailor's chalk, but they're very good for marking things on your fabric, marking dots, tailor tacks, points where you need to have things where you need to match dots together. They're really good for that. They're also good for tracing round. I have varying kinds of tailor chalk. This is my favourite tailor chalk, the ones, and I've got it in 4 colours. I've got it in yellow, blue, red and white. Yellow, blue, red and white, yes. And I use that because of sharp edge. I can draw lines, and I've had these for years. I find them really handy. Other people have chalk pencils. You can use the chalk pencils. Other ones use, there's all different kinds of tailor's chalk that you can use. The cheapest ones are the ones that I've just shown. You can get those on eBay, not very expensive. And an ironing pad. An ironing pad, I made one. It's fallen to bits now. But I made this, and it's basically a piece of cardboard. Don't know if you can see. I've been using the wadding. I've been pulling the wadding out to use it. Piece of cardboard, folded together with some wadding on the top and on the inside, and then a pillowcase type of thing made from it. And that was my ironing pad. It's starting to bend a bit, so I've now got rid of it. I don't use it anymore. But when you're beginning, something like that is very, very helpful to, make it yourself if needs be. And it's handy because if you've got a big enough desk or a big enough workspace, you can have it beside you with the iron, so that every time you do something, you don't have to keep getting up to go to the ironing board. You can iron it beside you. Penultimate, there's one more to come. One is hairspray. And this person said use hairspray to spray on the thread, so the end of the thread, so you can get it through the needle. That's another handy thing to have. And the last thing, which I think we all know, is a comfortable place to sit. Whenever you're working, if you're doing sewing, you need a comfortable place to sit. You need a decent chair or something comfortable. Now mine is I'm not sitting on it. Some people have these lovely chairs that you lean back on. Mine is just a square box. What I've got, I bought it for £10 on eBay. It's just a square box with a bit of elastic round there so that I can put things inside there. It's on wheels. It wasn't on wheels, or was on wheels. It's on wheels, so that for me, I can go from one machine to the other and back to the machine. So I've got an overlocker here, and I've got my other machine in front of me here. So I've got 2 machines that I can go to. And also I can get round, turn around there and go around there. That for me is an important part, but some people also feel a comfortable chair to sit on. I like this because I'm sitting upright most of the time. I'm having to make my back work. I find that there are some where you bend forward and you end up with backache. So I like this kind of a chair for me. So those are all the tools that have been recommended by my viewers, and quite a lot of them are long-term sewers, that they feel might be very helpful for you to have by the side of you when you're sewing. So till the next time, bye!